Ever since Wolfenstein 3D and even more so Doom appeared on PC, Amiga developers tried to hop on the FPS bandwagon and mimic the gameplay of these titles. Graphical Amiga chips, however, worked in a totally different way than the graphic cards on IBM PCs did, meaning that at least at the first glance the task was technically very difficult to achieve, by some even considered impossible. But before we go any further though, please hit those like and subscribe buttons below. That's just 2 clicks for you. Actually, let me show you. See? Piece of cake. Not much for you to do, but helps me more than you know. Thanks. As we know now, there are a lot of Doom clones on the Amiga. And even Doom itself was released years after the system was long abandoned by its duo of unlucky bankrupt owners. In this video, we'll highlight the best 10 of these Amiga exclusive FPS games, with a caveat that only the titles that didn't require RTG graphics or PowerPC CPUs will be here, and no games released after 1997, as it was the time when PC ports slowly started showing up on Commodore's machine. So grab something to drink, sit comfortably, and let's do it. Awful, terrible and beyond annoying level design. Boring and repetitive enemies and incredibly jerky and frustrating 90 degrees turning like in Dungeon Master or Eye of the Beholder games. On top of that, dark, chunky and detail devoid graphics and plain bad sound design. Death Mask is definitely a game to avoid at all cost, at least when playing alone. In 2-player versus mode, despite all its flaws, it's actually pretty fun for a match or two. Not your typical FPS, but when you think of it, there's actually no other genre it could be assigned to. Behind the Iron Gate is one of the first attempts at the Doom clone on basic 1MB Amigas. It's a Polish title and not a very good one at that. It looks bland, doesn't play great and is overall a bit boring and repetitive in everything it has to offer, aside from music which is surprisingly good. Not to mention controls which are awful at the very best. So why is it on this list at all? Well, the reasons are twofold. For one, Amiga didn't have many good FPS games before 1997, and second, for nostalgic reasons, as it was the very first ever Doom clone game I played on the system. Fierce is a game that only ever ran on CD32 consoles and AGA machines. I have a very mixed feelings about it. When I'm looking at it through narrowed eyes from afar, it looks great. Quite stunning actually, basically on near PC-like level. Definitely as if it was one of the best looking games on the system. When I don't squint my eyes, however, its odd technical engine that kinda zigzags the pixel shape, for the lack of a better word, gives me headache. And if you complement it all with poor level design and lackluster atmosphere, Fierce seems easily forgettable. And quite honestly, other than included level editor, nothing struck me as interesting about it today. In theory, Nemac IV could run on any Amiga as long as it had 1MB of RAM. In practice, approaching it with anything other than at least slightly upgraded one was not a great idea. On one hand, it looked great and the cutscenes were jaw-dropping for the time, on another it sounded awful and levels were beyond boringly designed. All grey and samey, all throughout. In general, a mixture of good and bad in equal amounts. Technically quite impressive title, and a good attempt at FPS on the system. But not very fun for any longer than a stage or two. Let me be quite clear here. Testament is not a great game. Heck, it's not even a good one. It's fairly decent at the very best. But decent is better than bad, if that's any consolation. It runs pretty good on basic 1200, which was not that common, and looks, say, okay. Sadly, it's plagued with collision detection issues, which make it a bit tough to play. Technically speaking, it was closer to Wolfenstein rather than Doom, but gameplay-wise was nowhere near either of these titles. Wasted opportunity, as its style similarity to Blood or Heretic seemed very fresh back then when it was released. Some would argue that to enjoy Alien Breed 3D2 properly, a graphic card was required, not to mention a very high-end Amiga, and there probably is some truth in that. But in theory, it could run in reduced graphics mode, displaying large chunky pixels on basically any AGA machine. It's a technical achievement unlike many. It is the very first ever real full 3D FPS game on an Amiga. It sports some amazing effects and generally looks like something that shouldn't have been possible on the system at all. All those achievements aside, while sounding great, it was just not as fun to play as the next few games on this list. Breathless is an AGA exclusive that runs surprisingly well on a basic A1200, obviously much better when upgraded. Aside from a lack of visible weapon, which by now should be clear is a reoccurring theme on the system, it's a very nice title to look at and a blast to play, at least for the very first few levels. After that, it becomes painfully clear that it's pretty repetitive in terms of both gameplay and graphical design, and all its technical prowess, while impressive, cannot sadly change the fact that the very best, because of it being quite dull, is only ever good for short gaming sessions. The Citadel is an unusual FPS as it seems to be running decent on most Amiga configurations, in various screen sizes and qualities obviously, but it just doesn't discriminate, and even on the most basic 1MB systems it can be enjoyed to a degree. It's one of few Polish attempts at the genre and definitely the best one of them all. Even though the main weapon is not visible on the screen, style-wise it could be argued that it's the most Doom-like game out of all on this list. The setting, the monsters, it all screams Doom. Funny thing about this one, however, is that its difficulty is proportional to its speed, meaning the stronger the system is and the faster the game runs, the more difficult it gets, to the point that it's worth not having it running too good to be able to enjoy it. Alien Breed 3D is an AGA and CD32 exclusive. It was released in an odd time, a year after Commodore went bankrupt, and a year before ESCOM, new Amiga brand owner, did as well. On basic A1200 it didn't look or run great, but when beefed up with a bit of a fast RAM and an 030 CPU upgrade, it spreads its wings. It's a very atmospheric title, converting to the original's look and feel to 3D with success and ending up being quite enjoyable game that kept player at the edge of the seat all throughout, especially because ammo and health pack management was crucial for survival. Solid second best spot. Gloom Deluxe looks and sounds more than good for its time, and it runs on both basic 1MB systems and newer ones with AGA chips alike. Also, unlike its predecessor, it shows equipped weapon on the screen. It may not seem like much, but it adds up to the immersion and was not common on the Amiga. But what is most important and most fondly remembered by Amiga owners is that Gloom Deluxe was a blast. Fast, bloody, and overall great time to be had. Especially in cool two-player split-screen mode, which was a novelty at time. Great game overall, and my absolute favorite FPS on Commodore's system. A well-deserved first spot on this list. Early exclusive Amiga FPS games were largely a mixed bag. Some great, others not so much. But we made it here to the end of this video, so thanks a lot for that. If you liked it, please click those like and subscribe buttons below. It's just a couple clicks for you, but helps me more than you know. And if you're feeling especially generous, I would appreciate a small donation. It would help me make more better content, get a better mic, upgrade my rapidly aging editing rig, and maybe even get a camera. Details are in the description below. For me, however, this is all, so have a good one, and I'll see you next time.